In 2019, Will Smith vlogged his entire colonoscopy experience from the preparation to the outcome. Originally, it was intended for this to be a lighthearted experience, but soon it made headlines announcing that the doctors found a cancerous polyp during the procedure. This was obviously a shock to him and the world, but luckily the colonoscopy caught it very early on, which very well may have saved his life. A colonoscopy is a scary experience, and many people don't like the idea of having a tube shoved up their butt. However, this procedure saves so many lives per year and could save more if people were compliant. Seeing these news articles, I was intrigued by this procedure and other similar procedures. That is why I decided to research about endoscopy, which includes procedures like colonoscopies and more. So what is endoscopy? The technical definition of endoscopy is a procedure in which an instrument is introduced into the body to give a view of its internal parts. Basically, doctors use a long thin tube with a camera and light at the end to examine your internal organs and do various procedures. I know it sounds scary and painful, but this procedure is actually painless and crucial to your health. There are two main types of endoscopy. The first one has an ungodly long name that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Luckily, they came up with a better name for it: upper endoscopy. This is when a long, thin, flexible tube is inserted through the mouth and throat to observe the upper gastrointestinal or GI tract. The second type is lower endoscopy. This is when a long, thin, flexible tube is inserted through the anus to observe the lower GI tract. This makes perfect sense. One observes the upper organs and the other observes lower. There are also other types, but these are the most common and similar to each other. To explain the process a little better, here's an animated visual created by the Mayo Clinic.
An endoscopy is a procedure used to visually examine your upper digestive system. During an endoscopy, your doctor gently inserts a long, flexible tube, or endoscope, into your mouth, down your throat, and into your esophagus. A fiber optic endoscope has a light and tiny camera at the end. Your doctor can use this device to view your esophagus, stomach, and the beginning of your small intestine. The images are viewed on a video monitor in the exam room. If your doctor sees anything unusual, such as polyps or cancer, he or she passes special surgical tools through the endoscope to remove tissue or collect a sample to examine it more closely.
So why would you go through an endoscopic procedure? Well, most commonly, endoscopy is used to diagnose diseases in the esophagus, stomach, colon, ears, nose, throat, heart, urinary tract, joints, and abdomen. This is extremely important because most of the time doctors can't access these locations without going inside the body. So an endoscopic procedure is a minimally invasive procedure that allows them to observe these areas. There are three main reasons why doctors will tell you to go through an endoscopic procedure. The first one is to screen for and prevent cancer. This is the most common reason why people have to go in for an endoscopic procedure. It is highly recommended that once you turn 50, that you go in to make sure cancer hasn't started developing in parts of your body unseen. This is why Will Smith went in to get his procedure done, and luckily they found the cancer early on and can be prevented from going larger now. The second is to diagnose the disease or find out the cause of symptoms. This is usually done when someone is already showing symptoms of a disease and a doctor needs to have a deeper look to see what may be causing it. Least commonly, endoscopy can be used to give treatment. This is called endoscopic surgery. This is when surgeons use an endoscope to go through a small incision in the body and do various tasks. This can be anything from cutting tissue from removing internal stitches. Any type of surgery that an endoscope would be doing would be minimally invasive because of its small and flexible nature. There are many crucial components to an endoscope and many attachments used for different things. The endoscope itself is a thin tube with a powerful light and tiny camera at the end. If you look at the right, you can see all the little pieces to it and the design needed to make it very flexible. In addition to the endoscope, there are some other tools used for specific procedures. There are flexible forceps that take tissue samples from inside the body. On the right, you can also see a pair of biopsy forceps used to take tissue samples for suspicious growths in the body. There are also cytology brushes which take cell samples, and suture removal forceps used to remove stitches inside the body. As you can see, there are many small components that are needed in an endoscopic procedure, and many small crevices where germs could hide after a procedure. In fact, this is one of the main problems endoscopy faces today. Every time an endoscope is used, it needs to be cleaned thoroughly. However, contaminated endoscopes have been associated with more healthcare outbreaks than any other medical device. Failure to properly reprocess an endoscope can result in the transmission of infectious viruses including hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV, and other bloodborne pathogens. Obviously, this is crucial to fix because this device is being inserted directly into the body with viruses ready to kill already attached to it. So that brings us to the question of, how do we improve the endoscope reprocessing procedure to minimize transmitting infectious viruses? The solution to this problem is not easy. Doctors and engineers considered changing the design of the endoscope to reduce the number of crevices where there wasn't easy access for cleaning. However, by doing this, they were compromising the effectiveness of the endoscope, so they decided with the technology today, this couldn't solve the issue. They also couldn't just dispose of the endoscope because the technology on it is much too costly to replace after every procedure. Luckily, the CDC decided to take more of a process redesign approach. Instead of leaving it up to the hospitals to make their own sterilization requirements, in 2016 they sent out a list of steps that needed to be followed to clean the endoscope after the procedure. These steps were pre-cleaning, leak testing, manual cleaning, visual inspection, disinfection, and sterilization, storage, and documentation. This procedure was great for reducing viruses, however it was lengthy and difficult for hospitals to achieve. Because of this, companies have designed their own machines to automate steps 4 through 7. These endoscope reprocessing machines use sensors to detect any unclean spots, use sterilization methods that reach every spot a human couldn't reach, is user-friendly, and does in-depth documentation for you. Instead of me trying to explain how the machine works, here's a video from a manufacturer that is selling them. There are many effects these new CDC guidelines had on endoscopy. Now, the manufacturers of endoscopes are required to send a step-by-step process for cleaning their endoscopes, and some are even creating machines like we just saw to make sure the sterilization meets the requirements. The protocol is now easy to follow these guidelines and machines and is resulting in fewer outbreaks. which this then creates a safer endoscopic process and increases the willingness of a patient to follow through with the procedure, if we can say the procedure is extremely safe. So what's the real societal impact that having a safer endoscopic procedure creates? Well, we already know endoscopy saves lives, but to put this into perspective, we can look at the statistics for stomach cancer. 28,000 people are diagnosed with stomach cancer in the US per year. According to some sources, this is the second most common cancer worldwide. Once stomach cancer goes into the fourth stage, a person only has a 4% chance of survival. However, if caught early on, people will have a 90% 5-year survival rate. This is a huge difference in probability from 4%. By going through a routine endoscopic cancer screening procedure, stomach cancer can be caught early and chance of survival is very high. Unfortunately, the US still has 11,000 deaths from stomach cancer per year. By having a more sanitary endoscopic procedure and normalizing the process, more people will be willing to go through with it, and we can potentially reduce the number of deaths by cancer. I hope you now understand the importance of endoscopy and how much of an impact it has on people. I know it seems scary, and you probably don't want a doctor to shove a tube down your throat or up your butt, but I hope you decide to comply with the doctor's recommendations when the time comes, because it could very well save your life.